Hello, I am Professor Eric Martin, and welcome to History 102. In this short video, I want to spend a little bit of time setting up Chapter 21 on capitalism and the Industrial Revolution in the hopes that it will provoke some more interesting discussion, and also that you guys will start getting better discussion postgrades out of the process. So, before I do that, it might be useful to think a little bit about what we've done so far at the conceptual level so you can kind of see how we're building our historical skills. And again, like I said in the general education video before, these historical skills are good for us no matter what our major is, because in the end, we're learning how to work and process and analyze information. So far this semester, we worked with being able to identify primary and secondary sources and being able to understand primary data and secondary source data. And then we worked on being able to compare the data, all right, compare different sets of primary source data to one another. And then we worked on thinking about some of the historical concepts, like distinguishing between a historical change and a revolution, and thinking a little bit about what that means and what it means as historians, the kind of labels that we use to put onto things. And then last week, what we worked on was taking our primary and our secondary source readings and doing a more intensive analysis and a more intensive reading of our data, because sometimes the data is not self-explanatory, especially data that was written 200-300 years ago. Yes, you speak the language, but the vocabulary is not necessarily familiar. And then you also have to figure out context too, right? So these are the things we've been working on so far. This week, what we're going to work on is a couple of things. Now, one thing through the Bridging World History video that you're focusing on is the idea about whether or not the Industrial Revolution itself was a particularly European phenomenon, or whether or not it was a wider spread global phenomenon. So keep that in mind. But as many of you have already seen through your grades, discussing the videos is easy. We need to discuss the documents. All right, the documents in the World of History Reader. Now, the documents in the World of History Reader go along more or less just like the materials for Bridging World History. But there's another twist that it throws into it, and I think that's important. And that is important is in the documents for this week, y'all are being asked to figure out the difference between the historical process of industrialization and the historical process of capitalism. All right, keep that in mind. What is the difference between industrialization and capitalism? So one of the things that you're going to want to do as you do your readings and as you create your discussion posts is distinguish between the two historical processes, because what happens is they kind of emerge onto the world scene kind of at the same time, but they're different. Keep in mind that industrialization is the particular technological transformation of society. It's a particular technological transformation. And capitalism is a particular economic organization. Technological transformation versus economic organization. Just think about that as you go through the documents, all right? See if you can come up with a nice, clear definition of what industrialization is. See if you can come up with a nice, clear definition of what capitalism is in the 19th century. And then, as you go through, think about these as historical process. Where do you see the effects of industrialization? Where do you see the effects of capitalism? How are they intertwined? How are they distinct? How are they moving in different directions, different effects, different interests? How are they not? That's kind of the grand thing. Now, I want to talk real briefly about a few of the documents that you're going to read this week, just to kind of help. There's a couple of documents that are important. So the Arnold Pacey piece and the Peter Stearns piece, those are two secondary sources. Read those carefully. The Arnold Pacey piece is a classic in the history of technology. Read him carefully. Get an idea about what he's thinking about, what this industrial revolution means. The pieces by Mary Antin and the Italians in Two Worlds, and I'm kind of jumping around through the chapter. Get a look at those pieces to get a sense about what the new technological systems and what the new social organizational systems meant for these people. Okay. The Sadler Report, that's a government document issued to the House of Commons describing what is going on. And then the question for you is, what is it describing in terms of, is it describing the effects of capitalism? Is it describing the effects of industrialization? What is it? Okay. Now, the other two documents are really the ones I wanted to talk about real briefly. One of them by Adam Smith, an excerpt from The Wealth of Nations, and the other one from Karl Marx and Frederick Engels on the Communist Manifesto. These two documents, you would be very smart to look up the authors. Go to the Stanford Online Encyclopedia of Philosophy, open up your Traditions and Encounters textbook, or whatever textbook you purchased because of the price for this class. Look this stuff up. Because with these two documents in particular, knowing who the author is and what kind of world they're living in at the time really might help you understand what they're saying. You know, in a lot of ways, Adam Smith is the founding father, right, of free market philosophy. But read the document carefully. Read who he was. Read about the time frame. Okay, and then it's a little bit the same way with Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto. I am going to suggest to you that whatever you think you know about communism, you just erase it from your brain and read this document with a clean slate. And the reason I say that is because for many of you, your association with communism is 20th century, Cold War, Russia versus the United States, China versus the United States, Cuba versus the United States, that kind of thing, right? It's related. However, take a look at the publication date of the Communist Manifesto. It is not published in the 1940s. It is published in the 1840s. Cold War, don't think about it. Charles Dickens, that's what you should be thinking about. Great Expectations. You remember that? You probably had to read it in high school. Think about that kind of world. That's the kind of world that Engels and Marx are responding to. Now, when I get finished with this video, assuming all goes well, I know of at least one pretty good 4 or 5 minute breakdown of Marx and Engels, because this their analysis has ramifications for history, for psychology, for sociology, for all the social sciences, because they inject this idea of maybe pick your thing is different depending on what social class you're from. Maybe history looks different depending on your social class. Maybe your position in the economy looks different depending on your social class. Maybe the way you worship, religion is different depending on your social class. Maybe the kind of mental illnesses that you're susceptible to is different depending on your social class. So they've got a lot of interesting ideas that penetrate the social sciences later on that I think are useful. So I know one very short video that I'm going to go ahead and post along with the announcements. I'm going to look for one for Adam Smith too. The couple that I know about, I don't know. I'll probably post one. But anyway, this is my way of saying do some recon on Adam Smith, do some recon on Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, and this whole discussion will probably be much more interesting for you. So, having said that, I hope the class is interesting for you. This is an interesting part of it, and so that's all I got. Y'all feel free to email me, give me a call at the office, drop by during my office hours. If none of that works for you, email or call, and we will figure out some kind of a mutually convenient time so that we can do a Google Hangouts or a Skype or whatever, so we can make sure that you're learning the kind of thing